Hello and welcome to Curzon Living Room, a season of live Q&A events on Curzon Home Cinema. My name is Elizabeth Sankey. I'm a filmmaker from London, and today I'm in conversation about I'm Your Man with Dan Stevens, who is in the film. It'd be weird if we were talking to him and he wasn't in the film. If you're watching us live, we're taking your questions via comments on YouTube and Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @CurzonCinemas. Please use the hashtag Curzon Living Room, and we'll read out as many as we can. Dan, thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So lovely to see you after seeing you play a robot. It's kind of like a strange thing. But the first question I wanted to ask you, which was something that I kept thinking when I was watching the film, was do you think you could fall in love with a robot who had been perfectly created for you?
That's a very good question. If they were as sweet as Tom, very possibly, I think. I don't know. I think it's one of the great questions that the film, one of the many questions the film throws up, really, is, should we live with such a thing? What would that look like? And actually, I think, as with a lot of sort of AI and Android films, it becomes less about the android and the technology and really about the human who might desire it, and I think that was one of the things that really struck me about the screenplay in the first place, was just how much it makes you think about humanity and where we've got to.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the scenes that really stuck out for me was toward the end of the film when they leave kind of the urban setting behind and are in nature. And you see Thomas having that moment with the deer. And for me, I felt like that was the first time that Alma had really seen him kind of in the entirety of his personhood. And he was having this experience without her. And that's what ultimately made him more attractive, because no offense, you're a very attractive man. If a robot was saying to me like, oh, here's this bath with rose petals, I'd be out the door. Like, that wouldn't be one. So yeah, what was that? Did that scene mean something to you guys when you was it kind of a crucial moment, I guess, for the character?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I mean, every time you see him in any new context, it's kind of fun and there's something to play with. And I think, one of the elements that we really enjoyed playing with was this sort of almost childish naivety to Tom, where he's learning in literally every single situation and every single interaction. There's a recalibration, and sure, he can probably call up infinite pictures of deer in his mind. I don't know, but to actually be there and experience it, and to know that that's a part of human nature in a way, is that nature, he calls it, let's have a nature experience. I think he said, I can't remember what the exact translation is, but yeah, yes, there's many interpretations of that, of course, but but that's a part of humanity, and that he's sort of, every time you see him learn a little bit more about what it is to be human, there's something kind of delightful about that.
Yeah, and I think it's so good because that feels like one of the only times where he's not trying to do something for Alma's benefit. He's having this experience, and I don't know, that I felt like I thought a lot about the female gaze when I was watching the film, because I love romantic comedies, and it definitely is a romantic comedy. But as a genre, they're really difficult to subvert because they rely on formula and tropes, and also because that can make it lean more towards like the stereotype. So like at the end of the film when we see the man with his robot, and I feel like that's a very sort of specific thing that in our culture is like, oh, this is what the ideal woman would look like. But then with Alma, I feel like you really do see Thomas through like the female gaze, and the way that he is with her, it just really works because you see her rejecting all of that stuff and then actually finding him her own way. Was that something that you and Maren and Maria were talking about when you were making the film, about the female gaze and how to flip it?
Yeah, I mean, it's by its very nature, it's a female-led film, and in fact, it's one of the first films I worked on where the majority of the crew were female also. And but Maria's perspective, she wrote this with her partner Jan, and so they definitely had fun with the sort of back and forth male and female perspective, and you can tell that in the sort of in the wit of the play of it. I think one of the interesting questions that was really thrown up, and I don't know if this is to your point about the female gaze or not really, but about you know, if you could choose, because I think now we live in a culture where you can type in what you're looking for, I guess, in one of these apps, and it'll sort of throw up a bunch of suggestions. Whereas, you know, I don't know how long ago, 20, 30, 40 years ago and more, it was left to fate, to happenstance, like who was in the bar, who was in your village, or who, you know, that you were able to meet and fall in love with. And now you can sort of almost pre-program it, and it's sort of, it narrows that. And so obviously in our paradigm, it's like, it's very specific. It's like, okay, if you could have exactly what you think you would want in an ideal partner, and obviously, yeah, with the female perspective on that question, it is quite a different, and I think a more sort of complex story for it in a way than the sort of, as you say, the traditional rom-com, many of them made by men, with a very particular aesthetic to them, shall we say. And I think, you know, there's something about Alma that is unconventional, and it's complicated. You know, what does her ideal partner look like? And there are actually many similarities between Tom and her ex, who we meet briefly, who is a, you know, delightful actor and a really funny, it's a great performance from Hans Lowe, and you know, there's something sort of odd and sometimes quite robotic about his character in a way. You know, there's sort of a C3PO quality to him as well as Tom, and so you start to think, well, maybe that's her thing, you know. But you know, she sort of defies. I think she would disagree with you know, that you could put such a definition on it for her.
That's really interesting though, because I hadn't thought about that potentially, yeah, part of his character is, in terms of being attracted to her, is that he's kind of almost been programmed to play up his more robotic elements, whereas somebody else, because actually, yeah, when you meet the woman that's coming in kind of advising you both and is from the company, and it's obviously that she's a robot, you don't see that coming, whereas I feel like with Thomas it's much more obvious from the start that he's kind of because of your brilliant performance. But yeah, I also just felt like it was such the kind of, because you're German, aren't you? You're not, no, sorry, you're fluent in German.
I guess, yes, I'm fairly fluent, I would like to say. I hate to say I'm fluent in German, because someone will inevitably want to throw me into a situation where I haven't got a clue what's going on. But yes, my German's pretty good. It got a lot better this summer. Yeah, I was definitely familiar with it before the film, yeah.
Because I feel like this is a huge generalization, but I feel like German is a very sort of ordered language. It's very precise, and I think that really added to the character. And I was wondering, you know, did that feel different to inhabit a different sort of language in a different space in terms of your language? And do you think the film would have been very different if it had been that Thomas was American or English?
I think so. I think, I mean, certainly for the purposes of this film, it seemed to fit. And I think Maria really wanted to find a foreign actor who could speak German to have that strangeness, that otherness to him. German is, you know, it's a wonderfully technical language, but it's also, I think, very, very expressive. Like, they can say exactly what they mean. And it's kind of wonderful in that aspect, you know. And there are similarities with English in that they really delight in their words, their word choices. And there's a lot of fun had with, you know, obviously Tom's odd or wrong choice of words. He uses German that even for a German is ridiculously complicated. And
what kind of stuff?
Well, some of it's very, very technical. The scene in the car, for example, you know, when he's sort of explaining, kind of, you know, subtly suggesting how she should drive better. There's lots of sort of odd choices there. There's the word klönen, the klönen ein bisschen. It's like, I suppose it's like chat. It's like it's a very colloquial sort of word for like chatty, you know, which Alma definitely isn't. She's not a chatty kind of lady, you know. And he just uses odd odd words, and that's a very delightful thing, I think. And there's a lot of kind of linguistic delight in the screenplay.
So that's a whole extra layer that, you know, English speakers wouldn't be getting, I guess.
Well, I don't know. The version I saw, and I don't know what the subtitles, I imagine they're the same as the version I saw. The English subtitles actually did a really good job of picking translations that sort of fitted. There's a scene where she says, look, okay, just don't say this, don't say that, and don't say that, which there are no direct translations for what he was, the examples that she was coming up with. But I can't remember what the English translations were, but they were things like, don't say toodaloo, don't say, it's just like odd. I forget what they are now, but it's, yeah. And he's like, oh, okay. That's off the list, and it's very easy for Tom to adapt if he's told.
Oh yeah, when he kind of deletes them from his system.
I forget what the English translations are, but the Germans like Tschüssikowski and things like that, which are just like, again, there are certain Germans who use that language and that's fine, but it's very much not Alma.
Okay, yeah. We have a question from Catherine Johnson via YouTube. How many weeks was the shoot, and was it during the pandemic?
It certainly was during the pandemic. It was during July and August of last year. So it was about 8 weeks we had to shoot. It was all shot in Berlin, much of it on a studio, which we were very lucky to have, so that we could have a sort of controlled environment with very strict protocols. And it was the first thing I'd shot under sort of the new protocols, with everyone in masks and being very, very careful, and multiple testings and all sorts. And so it was definitely a very different way of working, but yeah, we were lucky to get to make it at all. Yeah.
Have you found there's any benefits in terms of the COVID protocols that have had to be enforced? Like, is there anything about it you're like, actually this is better?
There are always a lot more people than you expect on a film set generally, and I think what these protocols have done is slightly reduce that, so that there are perhaps slightly fewer people knocking about, and there's this, the really essential crew who admittedly have to work twice as hard because there are fewer people, but it sort of it focuses the work in a way. And I think especially because we, everybody, in front and behind the camera realized how lucky we were that we were able to make this. And I always feel pretty lucky when I get to go to work and make a film anyway, but this one felt, we all felt especially lucky, and I think really kind of poured something extra into it as a result. I don't know.
I heard that you stayed in character on set between takes. Is that right?
I never quite know what that means. I suppose it's from the outside, it looks like that. I mean, I definitely had to maintain a certain mode, and also just to keep the German going. I wanted everyone to speak German with me, on and off set the whole time, and it was the most immersive language experience I've ever had. And so
your face must have been aching, because I find whenever I have to speak in an accent or like voice that isn't mine, my face just
I tell you what I found, and I've found this before in Germany, and it was, I think, a bit less this time because my German was getting better. It's not so much, I mean, obviously your mouth moves in a slightly different way and you produce sound slightly differently, and there's that. But I find actually the most exhausting thing is not being able to say stuff that you would say normally on a film set. So the sort of day-to-day chatting and the sort of incidental comments that I might like to say, I don't quite have the speed or the facility to come out with it in German. So I just sort of end up biting my tongue, and I found that quite exhausting. So I would, maybe that's why I looked like I was in character the whole time, because I was just not quite sure how to say what I wanted to say.
We have another question from Laura. She doesn't have a surname. She's like Cher. Yeah. How did you keep a straight face whilst filming that dancing scene?
Oh my God.
I hope to see you doing more romantic, not romantic comedies, more comedies in the future.
I hope so too. Yeah, it's funny how often dance seems to crop up in things I'm doing these days. There was me thinking this was a German romantic comedy, and nope, you need to do the rumba. I worked really, really extensively with a brilliant ballroom teacher in Berlin, a man called Daniel Stepford.
Boring. I was like,
oh no, he was anything but boring. No, he was fantastic. But the rumba, when you I'm sure you've watched Strictly, when you see people are really proficient at the rumba. It's a very, very precise move, and it's something very funny. It's not really robotic, but it's just the precision of it to make it perfect and to, you know, to really do it well. And this teacher was so precise. He was very, very strict in a way, you know, and really kind of put me through my paces. And I was determined to get it as good as I could in the time available, you know, and it was a great way. I often find those sort of parallel things that you have to train for or study for when doing anything, any film or television or whatever, is that it kind of, it feeds back into the work, into the character. And so just in learning the precision required for that rumba, that sort of fed into a lot of other mannerisms and sort of physicality for Tom.
Yeah, I can totally see that. I wanted to talk about the end of the film because I just couldn't stop thinking about it for so long because it kind of felt like two things happened where Alma sort of makes her peace that, you know, she sticks to her morals and like she's not going to go back on what she thinks and, you know, what she thinks is right and that's what she tells the company. But then she also just can't, once you've found your perfect person, like how do you live without them? And I just thought it was such again, going back to rom-coms, and because normally we would have the declaration of love, but there was no point in doing a declaration of love because he would have known what she was going to say and he would have had the right response. But it ended up being so much more kind of bittersweet and moving because it was this kind of like just acceptance that she needed him in her life, which I mean, I've been married for, I can't remember, 10 years. And I think like, I love my husband very much, but I do think that there's that sort of, I guess like that acceptance of like, this is the life that I want to, that I'm choosing. And as you were saying earlier, like there's always that thing of, oh, there's other options and now we're so used to getting like the perfect version of something. But yeah, what was it like? How do you feel about that ending, I guess? And yeah, what was kind of going through your heads when you were filming it?
Yeah, I think there's something lovely about how Alma, you know, she's so brilliant, she's so logical. Her report is very, in many ways it's very right, you know, it's very smart and she makes a lot of good points, but it is that kind of classic rom-com thing of like head against heart kind of thing. It's like against my better judgment, despite all of this, I've got to go. And you know, and in the back of her mind, she's like, oh, I think I know where he is, you know, and just that knowledge alone is kind of a bond between them. And the fact that he walks, I mean, all right, he's a robot, it didn't cause him genuine pain, but he walks from Berlin to Denmark. That's like a really long way. And
it's the only time as well that his hair is like slightly,
it's just a little mussed up. And yeah, we had like, it was the first time where we put any sort of dirt on his costume, or, you know, you barely notice it in the film, but it was like he was just ever so slightly disheveled, but not at all shaken by it. And there's something so beautiful about about the fact that they both sort of knew where to end up in a way. And he might not be, even though he's supposed to be the perfect partner, he might not be the perfect partner, but there's something in her that just has to go and go to him. And I think that's where it comes back into, you know, a classic romantic comedy sort of territory in a way.
But normally her character would sort of have to overcome something and she would have to be changed and she would probably throw everything out the window and be like, this is who I am now. But I really liked that she was still like, I'm still Alma. I just love this robot.
Yeah. And her life has kind of been turned upside down, you know, all this, the work that she's been doing has been thrown out the window. She's got to start again. And so there is a sort of, I suppose there is a turning point in her life at that moment, largely caused by Tom, I should say. But although he didn't write the other project, but he discovered it. Yeah.
This is from Lisa Harding. What are your criteria for choosing a creative project? Not many British actors would choose a German-speaking robot romantic lead, which is true.
That is true. I mean, maybe if they spoke German, they might. I don't know. It was certainly an unusual one to come across my desk, and I was saying this to someone else, like normally a script comes with a cover letter, it comes, at least, my agent will have read it, or somebody will have read it and say, hey, there's this great director, or we've read this, we think this is great role. And this came with nothing. It was literally like, we've had a call, they're looking for an English speaking actor, an English actor who can speak German. Have a look, and I was totally on my own, and so I got the dictionary out.
So they hadn't read it. You were like,
no, they hadn't read. They just read a synopsis that was fairly sort of surface, but I was really on my own with this one, and it was in the middle of the pandemic, and so yeah, I just sort of dusted off the dictionary and sat down with it for a day or so, and it was, I was so delighted by it. I can't tell you, I was partly delighted that I could translate it at all. I was like, oh, I've still got it. And then, to not only translate it, but then to discover just how quirky and sort of beautiful it was, and funny and touching. And anyway, all of these things that I got out of the translation, I was really happy to discover that I translated it correctly, that I didn't show up and I was sort of thinking I was going to be in the wrong film or something. And I had a great chat with Maria. We had a series of chats before I got out to Germany, and she really said, look, if you can learn this, this very technical German, if you can deliver it at the speed that I want, the rest is your playground. You can create Tom however you want. I just need this from him. And there was a sort of a real, mutual fandom going on. And she's a really fantastic actress. And I thought Unorthodox was really brilliantly directed. And so, yeah, we just had an amazing time just sort of creating this character. And it was very much, a lot of the look of it I put in her hands. I was like, well, how did you see him? It's not for me really to create Tom. I really wanted it to be created by Maria, by Maren to an extent, by the costume designer, all of these, all women, I should say, all kind of having their input in what their ideal Tom would look like. And so I definitely gave my hair and hair color over to the production and all the rest of it. And, we had this slightly kind of plasticky look with the makeup and things like that. And we played with that, in pre-production a bit, just how artificial he would look, and the hair color being slightly the wrong cut, it just slightly off, that it just looks a little bit artificial, but also slightly based on sort of Cary Grant. There was a lot of talk of Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant, Katharine Hepburn and Jimmy Stewart, and those kind of that sort of screwball, battle of wits kind of thing, and that sort of world, living in that kind of world for it was really fun.
Yeah, I love at the party where he just is so funny, like pretending to be really robotic and like
right and giving the sort of the worst version of what we think a robot might speak like, and or certainly an outmoded version, and just knowing how to play with someone's expectations. He's quite a sophisticated android, really, Tom. It's German technology. It's
very expensive, I imagine.
Probably.
And also doesn't seem to need to charge as well.
Oh, I think he does. I think there's that weird scene that we see
in the
bedroom.
He's
kind of doing sort of impossible yoga. We always imagine that, and I don't know if you really see it, but there's like a case with some batteries in. I don't think we ended up really seeing it, but the idea was that when he was doing this sort of weird physical sort of reconfiguration, that he was sort of recalibrating or uploading something or charging batteries.
And you said that there was a predominantly female set. Was that new and kind of unique? How was that? Did it change the sort of mood on set or anything?
I think so. I don't know. I mean, it was a first for me, and I think a first for a lot of people actually. And it was something that Maria was very, very keen on, and it was interesting. It was, I think, there are inevitably, when you're making an independent film in a very limited amount of time, especially during a pandemic, there are a lot of stressful moments, and I just think that the stress was handled in a different way. Which was interesting and I think helpful, but there's always stress in those environments.
Yeah, it's quite a short shooting period, wasn't it?
It was, and yeah, we were one of the first films that Berlin had sort of allowed to happen under those circumstances, and so there were a lot of things that, you know, made it more challenging than normal, but it was a really happy set, and it was intense, but, you know, a lot of fun.
Let's finish up with a question from Lillian B. What kind of role have you not yet played but would like to play?
Oh, that's a really good question. I sort of like to be surprised, really, and just sort of read something that comes along and be like, oh, that.
Yeah, you seem to always choose really diverse, very interesting projects. I think that's kind of...
I like to. I mean, it's not to say that I wouldn't repeat a genre or something. I mean, it's very often it can be led by the filmmaker now, and so, you know, if it's a filmmaker that I trust, I'll sort of do what they want to do. I don't know what genres I haven't done. I haven't done a Western, a proper Western, I suppose, or some kind of thing like that.
You play a sheriff.
Some sort of outlaw. I don't know. Yeah, there are many genres I've yet to touch on, really. But I hope I get to keep playing in all of them, really. And it was certainly funny. You know, I hadn't really done a romantic comedy, I guess, before this. Not like this. And then I don't think there is one like this, really. This is kind of in a genre all of its own.
Yeah. What's your favorite romantic comedy?
Oh, that's a good question. I like a lot of Nora Ephron stuff. I think is fantastic. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'll just say her.
Just anything, Nora. Okay, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was lovely to chat. The film is so brilliant. I need to do my wrapping up speech now, which is, thank you so much for being here with us tonight, Dan. I'm Your Man is in cinemas now and available to stream on Curzon Home Cinema. If you enjoyed the film and this event, please tell your friends. Upcoming in the Curzon Living Room, we have tomorrow, Tuesday, 17th of August at 6 p.m. Uberto Pasolini and James Norton will be in conversation with journalist Ian Hayden-Smith about their new collaboration, Nowhere Special. You can follow Curzon Cinema on Twitter for all the latest updates. I've been your host tonight, Elizabeth Sankey. Thank you and goodbye.